It gets real hard for me to rush them when I see that it's actually a line at the giving table. Thank you very much for coming back in, and thank you for participating in the campaign. The child's kicked off. That seems to be going very well. We'll have some numbers up for you so that you can see that. But while we're talking about giving, let me just say, I joke around a good bit to kind of soften the edge of the fact that I'm constantly asking you to give of your hard-earned resources. I'm not bashful about it, and I'm definitely not ashamed to do it. If not now, then when? And if not us, then who? These battlefields have to be saved. These folks who are going to belong to the upcoming generations have to be educated on the importance of American history. We, in our own way, are doing our bit to make our nation stronger tomorrow by reminding people of the greatness of our nation in the past. And by inspiring great deeds in the future, we can do our part to make the future of our country a wonderful, bright future. Preserving battlefields is more about the future than the past. You hear me say that all the time. And it's more than just saving dirt. We are saving the hearts and minds of our country. We are educating people who are yet unborn. And so it's a really big deal what you do. And I've been tasked with trying to help bring us all together to do that. And one of the things that it takes is money. And so I'm half apologizing, half explaining for the fact that we're always coming to you for help. But I need your help. The country needs your help. And kids who have not even taken their first breath yet need your help. We have to save these battlefields, and we have to open them as outdoor classrooms, and that's all there is to it. Now, I want to direct you. You may have seen in your booklet, and I said this on our bus. I'm not sure if everybody heard it. Jack Owens put these books together for us. I think they're fantastic. You should give them a round of applause. I don't know what the heck else he did for us this year, but this is pretty cool. If you look, please take a look at this page and consider being a member of the Legacy Corps. The Legacy Corps is a way that you can keep helping this cause long after you're gone. Here's an interesting fact. Less than 2% of American wealth is in cash. That's mind-blowing. There are things that people can do for us after they've passed that they didn't have the ability to do for us while they were here. Please keep that in mind. Reach out to us. We have some really smart folks, led by Craig Stevens, who did nonprofit accounting his entire life, who knows all kinds of wonderful ways that this might work for you. Please consider this. And I want to announce kind of a bittersweet thing. Our newest member of the Legacy Corps. Some of you may remember Amy Kennedy's sidekick, Compadre. Compadre was her four-legged friend that came to all of our conferences and walked all of our battlefields with us for many years. And Compadre has passed away. And here's a picture of him and some of his ashes. And Compadre, through the help of his master, Amy, has left us $6,000 to put towards the Kernstown Col. Compadre's picture is going in our offices in Newmarket, and he will be listed as a member of the Legacy Corps. Now, with that said, let me put these things over here. I would like to ask Mr. Greg Ryan to come up, if you don't mind. I want to give you a quick update on our last campaign, and Jack, if you can throw up some imagery here. You got all of this stuff in the mail, and this is a campaign that's underway right now. We're over $60,000 raised. Give yourselves a round of applause. That's pretty good. And as you know from the mailing, what we're trying to do is preserve the Miller property. The Miller property is on the north end of the Cedar Creek battlefield, as you know. It is believed to be the site where General Ramseur was mortally wounded. It is a key battlefield feature on the landscape. When you go there and visit it, which I hope you do soon, you can see why it was an anchor point for that desperate attempt to hold the Confederate line against the counterattack that was coming from Sheridan. And so the house itself sits there. One Vermonter remembered that the house was filled with Confederate soldiers shooting out of every window. You can see the work that's going on there. You can see, and you read in the appeal that I sent to you, that this was an emergency situation. And the reason I brought Greg Ryan up is that I alluded in the mailer that we had a hero donor who stepped forward to get this thing off the market so that we could figure out as a group how the heck we could possibly save it. And I also said that at the end of the day, he just ended up deciding, well, I'll let him say it for himself. I'd like to introduce you to your hero donor, Mr. Greg Ryan.
Donor, yes. Hero, I'm not so sure about. I have always had a great passion in history, especially in the Civil War. And when I was a kid, my father and I would tour the battlefields together. And I have right now a son who is 16, and about 3 years ago he's 13, so I thought we'd do the same thing together. I live in Middleburg, Virginia, so I can have access to all these battlefields, but I thought it'd be much better, instead of having his father lecturing, that I got a real tour guide who knew what he was talking about. And so I got Peter Fulton, who many of you know. And so Peter, we were going through the Cedar Creek battlefield, and we stopped at the fatal stop, the fatal halt, where basically Gordon was stopped by Early, who was pushing onwards Sheridan's troops. And I saw this house there, the Miller farm. And I said, Peter, it's a shame that that's not part of the battlefield. And he says, Greg, it's funny you say that, because the family who own it, they live in Hawaii right now, and they like to sell it. So Peter got me in touch with Ken and Nick Carno, and they were very instrumental, because I talked to my accountant in upstate New York, our offices, and we figured outside that if I bought this property, and then basically the descendants of the family were very helpful, and then if over time, I put some money into it, fix it up, and then put an easement, giving up the development rights, that when I donate it to the Shenandoah National Field Bus Job Territory, I won't make money, but I won't lose that much. And to me, it's worth it for a worthy cause. And so I'm very passionate about it, like everybody else in this room, and thank you very much.
I'd like to ask former chairman of our board and current trustee, Mr. Rod Graves, to come forward. Everybody here probably knows Rod and Brother John and the Graves family, and knows that our Philanthropic Leadership Award is actually named after the Graves family. I did not have the benefit of knowing Rod's parents, but I've learned a lot about his parents and about the ethos and giving philosophy that they had and that they passed on to their sons, their family. What the Graves family does for the Shenandoah Valley and for Page County, Calgary, and for countless unnamed individuals is just absolutely amazing. And so they show leadership now for generations. They have shown leadership in the Shenandoah Valley in philanthropy. And so we named, because of the Graves family's close association with battlefield preservation, we named the Philanthropic Leadership Award, the Graves Family Philanthropic Leadership Award. And this is one of the highest honors that the Battlefields Foundation can bestow. And it's not dollar-based. If you were a young elementary school student and had a penny raising campaign, well, that might be philanthropic leadership. It's not a dollar amount. It's about showing leadership and stepping up and embodying the feeling of the Graves family when it comes to giving back to the community and doing what's right for your community. And so I asked Rod to come forward to bestow this year's Philanthropic Leadership Award to Mr. Gray Bryant for what he's done for us. I don't know whether he's afraid we're going to take the award away from his family or not, but he just told me he's going to make the match for $25,000. You all are not off the hook. We're just going to raise that bar just a little bit. Thank you very much. And Jack, you want to come up and introduce the next
All righty, our last speaker before lunch. Like Kevin said, Steve Fan's not here, but we have the next best Steve Chesley. Steve's a very good friend of mine. His 23-year-old best friend, as we say. Steve is a board member at the Kernstown Battlefield Association. He was on our bus tours yesterday. He was one of the golf cart drivers, if you have the pleasure of riding with him. Steve's also a volunteer and docent with the Shenandoah Valley Battlefields Foundation. One of those critical elements. He's a part of our volunteer corps. Which just by a show of hands, we have some of the volunteer corps for the Battlefields Foundation here. Yeah, give those folks a round of applause. Our volunteers at our visitor service sites, our library and archives are so instrumental into everything we can do here, putting on these events, saving battlefields, opening our sites to the public. Steve's one of those great ones. Steve's had a couple practice rounds with the talk he's about to give today. Just a couple weeks ago, he gave this talk to some of you all here that are here in the room at the Shenandoah Valley Civil War Museum. We just did a podcast on it this past week, so Steve's pretty prepped for it. Steve's also a Shenandoah Guard member, and so one of those upper echelon of our giving society for our membership. But more importantly, Steve's a good friend. So everyone give Steve a nice warm round of applause.
Well, I feel like I'm at a huge disadvantage. I'm the third string quarterback today. Plus, it's 15 minutes to lunchtime, so we're not going to make it on time. I'm going to try to shorten this presentation as much as possible. I want to thank everybody at the second Kernstown tour yesterday with Scott. That's great because the talk I'm going to talk about Mulligan, but you can't talk about Mulligan without talking about second Kernstown a little bit. I'll probably repeat some of the things Scott said yesterday, but again, second Kernstown was a high watermark for Mulligan, so we're gonna talk about that. So I'm going to start by giving the ending, but first of all, I want you to look at this picture because this picture hangs in the 1854 Richmond house on the Kernstown Battlefield, and for years we've been giving tours there, myself included. We always get asked the question, what the hell is that medallion he's wearing? And We've never been able to answer the question. We thought maybe it was a Corps badge, but we're 99.9% sure that this picture was taken prior to the Civil War. So it's not a Corps badge. So 2 weeks ago, I'm watching a podcast called History Underground. Everybody familiar with that? They're in the Gettysburg Museum of History, going through. You come across a Confederate uniform, and attached to it is that badge. And I look at it, and I'm thinking, excuse me, French, holy shit. That's Mulligan's badge. So immediately, the museum curator says it's the Maltese Cross, which fits very well with Mulligan. So I looked it up. Maltese Cross originated with the Knights of St. John in the 11th and 12th centuries and symbolized helping the poor and sick. It represents charity, chivalry, generosity to friend or foe, loyalty, protection of the weak. And that is everything you need to know about Mulligan, because he was that man. And before I get into him a little bit, I want to recognize my main source for information. Look, I've never written a book. I've never published any article. I'm just an enthusiastic amateur historian. I'm on the board of directors at Kernstown, and Mulligan is near and dear to my heart. I want to recognize where I get most of all my information from Scott's book, Shenandoah Summer. He also wrote an article in the Blue Bay magazine in summer of 2006. So if I say anything incorrect, you blame that guy. So I'm going to start at the end of the story. We all know what happens to Mulligan at 2nd Kernstown. But on the afternoon of July 24th, 1864, roughly around 4:30 p.m., the Union forces are retreating through Winchester. Now, on the east side of Winchester on Front Royal Road, it's pandemonium. A lot of teamsters have abandoned wagons, and it's just chaos. Not so much through Winchester. As a matter of fact, Mary Greenhow Lee, who had a house, I'm not sure what direction they are, but right in the parking lot of the hotel here, notes in her diary that she was not happy about the Union soldiers who retreated from Winchester because a lot of them were happy and singing. And that irritated her because she hated Federals and she wanted to see them in misery. But anyway, so they're retreating through town. And one soldier in particular was in a desperate hurry to get to Martinsburg before the telegraph lines would cut. He needed to send a message to the wife of Colonel James Mulligan, Marion. Marion always traveled with Mulligan, and she was always nearby when he was in battle. This soldier was Colonel Mulligan's nephew, 18-year-old Lieutenant Martin Russell. Now, Marion was in Cumberland, Maryland at the time, so he was trying to get a message to her that her husband had been wounded at the Battle of Kernstown. And she's pregnant, she's got 2 daughters with her and her sister. And she is supposedly in Cumberland, Maryland, supporting the Union cause, whatever that means. Now, after receiving the message, Lieutenant Russell, well, after sending the message, Lieutenant Russell joins the rest of Crook's army, and they retreat over the Potomac in Maryland. Marion was somehow able to secure an army ambulance, and she arrived on the Maryland side of the Potomac River on the morning of July 26th. However, the driver of the ambulance refused to take her any further. She obviously wanted to get down to Kernstown, see her husband. He refused to take her. So Lieutenant Russell took the reins and escorted her across the river. He was not, the ambulance driver wasn't going to go any further because it's Confederate territory. He didn't want to risk it. Lieutenant Russell grabs her reins, takes the wagon, and they go across the river. Sure enough, within a mile after crossing the Potomac River, they run into the first Confederate soldier, who quizzically looks at them. I'm assuming that Russell was in his uniform. And quizzically looks at them, not sure what to do, and he says, "Ain't you a Fed?" Russell confirms this, explains the mission. This is Mrs. Mulligan. Her husband is wounded at Kernstown. I'm trying to get it down there to see. Confederate soldiers are not quite sure what to do, but he finally lets them pass. And he warns them before they leave, you will run into many more Confederate soldiers before you get there. And sure enough, they do. They run into groups of Confederates. But after hearing the purpose of their journey, a lot of these Confederate soldiers expressed kindly feelings toward Marion. And they even told her, we were at that battle. We saw your husband, and he's alive, and he's going to be okay. Now this was a huge, I can only imagine what a huge relief this was to Marion, because she had no idea what the condition of her husband was. She just knew that he was working. So now she's getting verbal confirmation he's going to be okay. So they continue on their journey. Then they run into Richmond. Now you've seen this picture twice before in the earlier presentations. John McClausland. Now McClausland's on his way up into Pennsylvania because he just got orders from Early to exact a ransom from Chambersburg, Pennsylvania, if he doesn't get it to burn to the ground. We all know that's what happens. But Lieutenant Russell is now disguised in McClausland as surly and peevish. Now, does he look like a surly man? So McClausland, since he's on his way to Pennsylvania, is questioning Russell as to numbers and locations of the federal forces. Lieutenant Russell refuses to provide him that information, and Russell describes that McClausland got surlier still. And he instructs an orderly to, quote unquote, take these persons to the first farmhouse and let them stay there until Early disposes of them. Hours go by. No message from Early. So Lieutenant Russell correctly surmises that McClausland's not said anything to Early. So Russell scribbles a note. He hands it to a passing Confederate cavalryman. He says, could you please give this to General Early, whose headquarters is in Martinsburg. At 10 p.m. that evening, a Major Rogers from Early's staff arrived with orders from Early to escort them to Kernstown and furnish them with every convenience. But they head to Martinsburg, to Early's headquarters, and they're immediately greeted by Colonel Sam Pendleton. Those of you that know civil history know who he is. He was Stonewall Jackson's aide, now he's Early's aide when he killed at Fisher Stone September 22nd. But Pendleton quickly notices that Marion was pregnant. And according to Russell, Pendleton has tears in his eyes as he pulls me aside, stating that, quote unquote, Mrs. Mulligan must be prepared for the worst, for it would be impossible that she would reach her husband while he still lived. So they rest a couple of hours, and Marion's okay with resting because she knows her husband's going to be okay. But now, Lieutenant Russell knows that that's not the case. So they continue on their journey to Winchester and reach there on the morning of the 27th. And soon, shortly after reaching Winchester, Lieutenant Russell learns that Colonel Mulligan had passed away the day before. He blamed the cruel and thoughtlessness of McClausland for not allowing Marion to spend the last few moments with her husband. By this time, Mrs. Mulligan, again, who's pregnant, is weak. She's had a couple of fainting spells. So he leaves her in town with the Unionist family, and he proceeds down Kernstown. Goes down the Valley Turnpike, turns on to the Pritchard Lane. For those of you that were there yesterday, you know the Pritchard Lane is very long. They go up to the Pritchard House. And when he gets there, Russell notes that the Mulligan's casket is on the front porch, surrounded by Union prisoners and Confederate soldiers. They're getting ready to have a funeral for him because the Confederates had a lot of respect for Colonel Mulligan. I'll tell you why shortly. But the Confederates even secured the hearse. So they secure the hearse, They help Russell load the coffin into the hearse, and they leave back for Winchester. Now, the hearse is following the wagon, but before they leave, Lieutenant Russell scours the property of Kernstown looking for the body of Marion's brother, Mulligan's brother-in-law, Lieutenant James Nugent, who was killed at the battle. The body was never found. As a matter of fact, it's still maybe on the property today, but it was never found, so Russell heads up to Winchester. Now, according to research we've done, Marion is sitting on the front porch of the house. She sees the wagon and the hearse pull up. Nobody has to tell her what's happened. She immediately screams, "Oh, James," and sinks to her knees. The Confederate soldiers soon organized, and they filed past the open coffin of Mulligan out of respect for him. The casket was eventually carried back to Martinsburg, where the party spent the night, and General Early himself ordered an escort to take them back to the Union lines. The party eventually arrived in Cumberland, Maryland. They secured a private train and took them back to Chicago, which is Mulligan's hometown. He was a noted lawyer and a politician. According to what I read, there were thousands and thousands of people waiting at the train station for him. That's how well loved and respected he was in the Chicago community. So that's the end of the story. Now we're going to go back to the beginning. Again, I'm going to be brief, but Mulligan was born June 30th, 1830 in New York. His parents had migrated from Ireland. He became a lawyer in Chicago. He became an attorney. He even went to the country of Panama in 1851 to take part in an expedition to survey a railroad across the country. He returns to Chicago in 1852, where he gets a mission to the bar in 1856. He became very involved in local politics, was a very rising star in the Chicago Democratic political scene. During the 1860 presidential election, he was a big supporter of Stephen Douglas. They became quite close. Mulligan was described as a born orator. He captivated crowds with his superb linguistics and flowing locks of hair. He was described as possessing an extraordinary ability to communicate and mingle smoothly with people, displaying an Irish flair that made him very popular. While he was in college, he became part of the Chicago militia called the Shields Guards. And by the time the Civil War started, he was a captain. Now, the first battle experience was they were ordered to Lexington, Missouri, where the town was being threatened by about 15,000 Confederates under General Stonewall Price. Mulligan, combined with the Missouri Home Guard, had about 3,500 men, so he was outnumbered about 5 to 1. He had his men dig entrenchments on top of a hill called College Hill. They skirmished for several days. This battle eventually became known as the Battle of the Hemp Bales, because the Confederates, there were around hemp bales going sloped in the Missouri River, and they pushed them up as moving fortifications to try to get to the Union lines. I don't want to go into a lot of detail about this battle. I'm going to try to save time. But again, during the battle, they had the Union commanders had 2 councils of war where they voted to surrender Lexington. And they did vote to do that, except Mulligan overruled them both times. He would not surrender. But however, the men finally were running out of food, water, and ammunition. So Mulligan finally agreed to surrender. The men were all, Union soldiers were all paroled, with the exception of Mulligan. Mulligan refused to accept a parole. For whatever reason, I don't know, but he did. Mulligan's wife was always nearby, as I told you earlier. She was close by. A good story that I got from Scott's book was that she marched into Price's headquarters, demanding to see her husband for he quote-unquote needed her care. Price balked, telling her that the colonel's quarters would not befit a lady. Marion snapped back that whatever quarters are good enough for Colonel Mulligan are good enough for his wife. So Price finally relented, and she stayed with him until October of 1861, when he was finally exchanged. Now this goes to Mulligan's character again. For some reason, Sterling Price was so impressed with Mulligan, both during the battle and after the battle, that after he was exchanged, Price gave him his personal carriage and horse and an escort back to Union lines. Now Mulligan's bravery in the face of overwhelming odds earned him the name the Hero of Lexington. So a lot of you may know that story. After he leaves there, he goes back to Chicago, where he's the commandant of Camp Douglas, the prison of war camp up there. He's only there for a couple of months. Then he and his Irish brigade are sent to Harper's Ferry in the summer of 1862, and they're hoping to join the Army of the Potomac's famed Irish brigade. But instead, they're sent to West Virginia, and for the next 2 years, they spend the time in the Department of West Virginia. There's still a fort there called Fort Mulligan in Petersburg. Has anybody been there? A few of you have. It's on my bucket list. I understand it's still well kept and big fortification. So I'm going to get to Kernstown here now. So Mulligan was always wanting his 23rd Illinois Irish Brigade to take part in open field combat. He finally gets his chance in July of 1864. His first opportunity came on July 3rd when he led a brigade repulsing Early's Confederate cavalry at Leestown. The Battle of Second Kernstown was fought because Union General Horatio Wright, who had been put in charge of pursuing the Confederates after they were at the doorsteps of Washington, D.C., incorrectly surmised that the Confederates early was heading back to Richmond to support Lee. While the battle with Woodford's Farm was happening on July 20th, Wright's force of 20,000 men crossed the Shenandoah River. And since Wright incorrectly determined that Early was in full retreat toward Richmond, he ordered the 6th and 19th Corps back to Washington, leaving only General George Crook's small army of West Virginia, which numbered only about 11,000 to 12,000 men. So with Wright's departure, the Federals went from having a 2-to-1 numerical advantage, being slightly outnumbered by the Confederates. Also, we have to remember that Early had the advantage of having some of the most experienced leaders in the Confederate Army. He had Vice President John Breckinridge, who served as Corps Commander. Under him were the cream of the crop of the Confederacy, such as Brigadier General Gabriel Wharton, John Gordon, Robert Rhodes, and Stephen Ramsey. Wright's decision to send the Corps back to D.C. did not sit well in Washington. Assistant Secretary of War Charles Dana stated, Wright started back as soon as he got where he might have done something worthwhile. Even Lincoln chimed in by saying Wright feared he might come across the rebels and catch some of them. So on July 22nd, Crook marches into Winchester, reorganizes his force into 3 divisions, one under Colonel Joseph Thorburn, one under Colonel Isaac Duval. And since Mulligan actually outranked both of these men, Crook had to set up a 3rd division for Colonel Mulligan. Now there were also 2 cavalry divisions under Generals Alfred Duffier and William Aguilon, both of whom Crook did not like and did not trust. Apparently, Crook didn't think much of Mulligan either. The feeling appeared to be mutual. After the first meeting, Mulligan noted in his diary, "I'm taking Crook's measure, his name suggests it." Now, on July 22nd and 23rd, there was a lot of skirmishing going on south of Kernstown between the Union and Confederate cavalry forces. Crook's cavalry reported that there was a large Confederate force in their front. After morning skirmishes on the 23rd, Crook instructed Colonels Mulligan, Thorburn, and Rutherford B. Hayes march their commands to Kernstown, push the Confederates back, and reserve their numbers. However, by the time they reached that, the Confederates had already retreated back to Newtown. Hayes reported this to Crook and concluded the Confederate foe was probably just a rear guard action to cover Early's return to Richmond. But all of the Confederates that were drawn, Mulligan had a bad feeling in his stomach, and he sensed that they'd not seen the last of them. He spent the rest of the afternoon reconnoitering the land with Crook, and again, they didn't go far enough south to find the Confederates. So Crook, or Mulligan, continually told Crook, we are facing a large force. Crook would have none of it. However, Crook did leave Mulligan at Kernstown just in case. Now, by about 5:30 p.m. that evening, Mulligan had deployed his camp up on Pritchard's Hill, in the high Providence west of the Valley Turnpike. Now, those of you that were there yesterday were on Pritchard's Hill. You got to remember, back in the 1860s, Kernstown was all farmland. There were very few trees, very few buildings. You could stand on the eminence of Pritchard's Hill and see for miles down the Valley Turnpike. Valley Turnpike was the only mechanized road in the area, and it was hard-packed gravel. So if you got an army with wagons and artillery and horses, you're going to be using the Valley Turnpike. So whoever controlled Winchester at the time usually had some forces on Pritchard's Hill. But again, you could see for miles back in the day. For those of you that were there yesterday, we had a pretty good day. You could still get a good view. You can see the Blue Ridge Mountains to the east. You can see the Alleghenies to the west. You can see Massanutten Mountain in front of you. The one thing you can't see is the Valley Turnpike because of all the development and all the trees. And it's getting worse and worse all the time, which is why an organization such as the Shenandoah Valley Battlefields Foundation is so important to what's going on in the valley. And I can't thank them enough for all the acreage they have saved. So that evening, Mulligan is on top of the hill in front of a campfire with his men from the 23rd Illinois Irish Brigade. Also with him is his brother-in-law, Lieutenant James Nugent, and his nephew, Lieutenant Martin Russell. That evening, they're discussing the pending danger, and there's an uneasiness in the camp. A lot of these soldiers realize something's going on, even though Crook doesn't realize it. That same evening, Early is down in Strasburg. He had just learned from Union prisoners, 6th and 19th Corps under Horatio Wright had departed for Washington, leaving only Crook's small army in West Virginia. I can only imagine that picture you had of Early smiling. Is that you? That may have been taken right after that. He must have been excited as hell. He immediately ordered an attack the next morning. Now I got a question for you Civil War historians. It seems like every time I read something about a battle or war, the opposite side gets information from prisoners. Well, you know, this corps left, this division's coming in. I guess that was before the time of just give you rank, name, and serial number, because they seem to divulge a lot of information back then. So, but at 4 a.m. on July 24th, the Confederate forces are preparing to move out of Strasburg, heading down the Valley Turnpike. Now, July 24th, 1864 was a Sunday. Mulligan was a staunch Catholic. He's up in Pritchard's Hill again. His men arose early for Mass. When Sunday prayers had ended, Colonel Mulligan sat on Pritchard's Hill and headed for his ambulance, joking and laughing with his men, trying to ease the tension. But at 8 a.m. that morning, he orders his men to lay battle on Pritchard's Hill. Now, despite repeated reports from his cavalry commanders stating they were facing a large Confederate force, George Crook disregarded their reports, primarily due to his personal dislike for Averill and Dupuy. There had been skirmishing for the last 48 hours. Crook just figured this was more of the same going on. Mulligan, however, was feeling confident in his position on Pritchard's Hill and his ability to defend it. He's probably remembering how the high ground had helped the Federals defeat Stonewall Jackson's first battle in Kernstown. And Mulligan describes the hill as follows. It is no doubt the best in the range of the country, and if we will not be ordered from it, I have no fear of the result. However, shortly thereafter, Crook arrives and orders him from the hill. So as the day progressed, Mulligan knows that they're seeing more and more soldiers, there's more and more intense fighting going on. Some of you heard this story yesterday, I won't repeat it for those that did not. Mulligan sends his 19-year-old brother-in-law, Lieutenant James Nugent, with a message for Crook, who was back in Winchester. Nugent warns Crook of the developments and repeated Mulligan's viewpoint that Jubal A was present in force. Crook responds as follows: Colonel Mulligan is mistaken. I have full and accurate information. There is nothing in his front but a few bushwhackers. I have sent General Abel's cavalry to the rear. Colonel Mulligan must move forward. Crook then questioned Mulligan's tenacity, stating, "Why, I haven't heard a half dozen shots fired this morning." Nugent, who's at this point getting pretty irritated with Crook, snaps back, "General, if you'll get a little nearer the front, you may hear as many as a dozen." Crook then angrily snaps back to Nugent, "You tell Colonel Mulligan instantly and persistently to advance. Tomorrow I will settle with you." Now, after Nugent departs, Crook starts to have some second thoughts, and he realizes that maybe Mulligan's small force isn't quite enough, so he's going to send some reinforcements. But he still believed they were only facing a small Confederate force. He summoned his two most trusted colonels, Rutherford B. Hayes and Isaac Jubal, for a conference. Crook informed the officers that the enemy was conducting a reconnaissance in force, and we must be prepared to fight a little. He then ordered Hayes to support Mulligan's left flank along the Valley Turnpike, and he kept Duval's division in reserve. Crook then actually mounts his horse and rode out to confer with Mulligan, who, of course, he found on Richmond's hill. Believing that they were only facing probably one or two divisions, Crook immediately orders Mulligan off the hill and tells him to advance his division, informing him that Hayes would be on his left. Mulligan immediately points out from the hill the latest Confederate dispositions. Crook could see that Mulligan's going to need support on his right. So he sends a message to Thorburn to send brigades under George Wells to the woods on Sandy Ridge to cover Mulligan's far right, and then another brigade under William Ely to support Mulligan's immediate right and advance with him. Now, in addition to early having experience in seasoned commanders, he also had battle-hardened and tested men in his army. Many had fought here with him in the Second Battle of Winchester, and they used the heights of Sandy Ridge to chase Federals off of Preacher's Hill. Many had also been here with Stonewall Jackson in 1862, so they knew the terrain very, very well. Hayes and Mulligan had never met, but as Hayes is going down the Valley Turnpike, he looks down Pritchard's Lane, he sees a man in a green shirt riding towards him. He assumes that that's Colonel Mulligan. He introduces himself. He says, "Colonel Mulligan, I presume?" "Yes, sir," replied Mulligan. "I assume this is Colonel Hayes." They introduce each other. They go over their orders. They know they're told to advance. Crook had sent an aide down there to meet with Hayes and Mulligan and make sure that they did follow orders. Crook had already reviewed Mulligan's assessment of the situation, so Mulligan was not going to disobey orders. Hayes agreed and stated, "Well, it's just as well we go forward as we are going up anyway." Mulligan had heard that there were Confederates on Sandy Ridge on his right. Hayes had heard that there were Confederates on his left. But again, they followed orders and they went straight ahead. Mulligan galloped back to the Pritchard farm, passing by the 13th West Virginia. One West Virginia soldier recalled, "I shall never forget his appearance as he rode past our lines, just in the commencement of the fight. Such a look of nobleness I never before saw in a man's countenance, as with coat off, revealing his green shirt, emblematic of his native land, and without his hat, his locks streaming in the air, he arose in his saddle and gave vent to his feeling, exclaiming, "Bully boys, brave boys, stand up to it, keep your line unbroken." However, in spite of all Mulligan's bluster, he soon came upon an acquaintance, and he remarked, "They are just too many for us. We will have to retreat." Mulligan clearly understood what Crook had yet to realize. And that was the best the Union forces could hope for was an organized retreat. Mulligan then organized his men and began his attack with about 1,200 men, attacking Confederate John D. Gordon's men, 2,800 of them approximately, who were straight in front of him. However, Mulligan's brave brigades could not get any further than the Presbyterian Church. We see Mulligan and Hayes just past the church. His men sheltered behind stone walls around the churchyard and tombstones in the cemetery next to the church. As a matter of fact, I've been told that that's the oldest cemetery in Shenandoah Valley. If you go out there today and tour the cemetery, you'd see pock marks in some of the headstones from the musket balls that hit them. But Crook was very impatient with Mulligan's failure to advance beyond the church. He was getting angrier and angrier with each passing minute. With the entire Union battle line encountering stiff Confederate resistance, Crook still failed to comprehend what the hell was going on. Crook shifted Ely's brigade, who was covering Mulligan's immediate right, back up to Sandy Ridge, and Gordon Thorburn back over there. These movements completely exposed Mulligan's right flank, and in the heat of battle, nobody told Mulligan that his right flank was now completely open. Meanwhile, Hayes gets his division gets basically ambushed along the Valley Turnpike. They got ambushed by at least 2,500 Confederates who were hiding behind a hill running perpendicular to Hayes' left. And they were almost completely annihilated with Hayes' old 36 Ohio taking the brunt of the Confederate fire. A Union veteran of the battles at Antietam and Chickamauga recounted that enlisted men went down as I never before saw them fall. Hayes, the one who was left of his brigade, immediately had to retreat up Richmond Hill. So now, Mulligan has nobody on his right, and now he has nobody on his left. He's got Gordon coming at him from the front. Mulligan has to pull his regiments back behind the stone wall along Pritchard's Lane with the 10th West Virginia on the right of the line, and the Spain 23rd Illinois Irish Brigade on the left. Colonel Robert S. Rogers of the Union 2nd Maryland Eastern Shore noted, "It was apparent that we were much outnumbered, flanked right and left." After seeing Mulligan's men pushed back behind Stonewall, Hayes' brigade pushed back up Pritchard's Hill, Thorburns' division pushed back on Sandy Ridge, the light bulb finally went off in Crook's head. He acknowledged what was happening and ordered Thorburn to retreat back to Winchester. Confederate sharpshooters from Georgia crept closer, laying the dry ditch known as Hole's Run. A lot of you saw it yesterday. About 100 yards in front of Pritchard Lane Stonewall. They started picking off Union soldiers on the 10th West Virginia, 23rd Illinois. In addition, Confederate sharpshooters also lay in rock outcroppings to the right of the Federal line from a lacing the Federal right to punishing fire. In his trademark emerald green shirt, Mulligan waved his hat over his head and urged his men to hold the line. As he rode past the 10th West Virginia, he shouted, "Give it to them, brave Virginians!" But shortly after he headed to the left of his line, behind the 23rd Illinois, 10th West Virginia crumbled under the pressure of charging Confederates and retreated up Richard's Hill. Mulligan then rode behind his 23rd Illinois, waving his hat in the air, he rose up and shouted, "Stand firm, 23rd." Never did he look better, thought Private Edmund O'Dwyer, than when riding along the line of battle to Winchester. At about 2 p.m., Mulligan determined to conduct a fighting retreat with his Irish brigade. He called to his men, "You may fall back, my boys, but fall back in order. I will stay with you." Shortly after these words left his lips, the third bullet smashes into his thigh, compelling him to dismount. His brother-in-law, Lieutenant James Nugent, sprinted to his side and yelled to the men, "Help our stricken colonel." Soon men were all around Mulligan, attempting to carry him from the field back over Winchester. Obviously, the gathering of banging flags attracted the unwanted attention of Confederate sharpshooters. Men started falling all around Mulligan. At this point, fire was coming from the left, from the right, and the front. "Leave me, boys," Mulligan commanded. "It's no use sacrificing yourselves." The color sergeant cursed and shouted, "We will never leave our colonel." In spite of his wound, Mulligan scolded him and said, "Sergeant, don't swear." Two more bullets then struck Mulligan in rapid succession, one in the shoulder, one through the chest. Lieutenant Nugent was holding the Stars and Stripes. This is Mulligan's brother-in-law. Crook said he will deal with him tomorrow. That never happens. Musket ball strikes him in the head, killing him instantly. Mulligan then said, "It's no use, lay me down and save the flags." His men again refused. But Mulligan commanded, "These do me no good, save your colors." His men then retrieved the colors and laid them down near the Pritchett house. Now, as the Confederates are overrunning the position, the Georgian saw Mulligan lying near the Pritchett house and could hear him moaning in agony. The Georgian later wrote, "Though an enemy, we could not refrain from sympathizing with him in his suffering, for he had the reputation of being a magnanimous foe." Confederates then carried the wounded Mulligan into the Pritchett house. Father James Sheeran, the Catholic chaplain of the Irish and French Louisiana Brigade, arrived at the house to administer the sacraments and communion and last rites to the dying Mulligan. Mrs. Pritchard even offered him a glass of brandy to soothe his pain, but he politely refused and thanked her, saying, "In all my life I never drank, and now that I come to die, I think it is too late to begin." I don't know if that story's true. Does anybody know an Irishman that didn't drink? Backing up a little bit, while serving in West Virginia, Mulligan had garrisoned in the small town of Petersburg, which was a decidedly Confederate town. He would not permit his men to loot, steal, or bribe. As a matter of fact, he helped feed the population. A Confederate surgeon from Patton's brigade had learned of Mulligan's kindness and generosity towards the town's citizens from his sister. He wrote him a letter about how kindly Mulligan had treated the civilians. Upon hearing of Mulligan's condition, the surgeon, whose name was Andrew Bartley, went to the Pritchett house and cared for Mulligan until he passed away. He died as Mrs. Pritchett cradled his head in her arms. Upon his death, even the Richmond newspapers paid him respect and issued words of condolence. "Peace to the ashes of General Mulligan. He was that rare man in the Yankee Army, a generous adversary." So, though this battle was decidedly a Confederate victory, it was to be the last in the Shenandoah Valley. After this battle in the burning Chambersburg, Pennsylvania, July 30th, Lincoln and Grant made a decision that they had had enough of the Shenandoah Valley. They put Sheridan in charge of about 24,000 infantry, 6,000 cavalry. Then you have the battles of 3rd Winchester, September 19th, Fisher Snow, September 22nd, Tom's Brook, October 9th, Cedar Creek, on October 19th, all of which were Union victories. And of course, you had the famous burning in the valley in late September and early October. The long Confederate domination of the Shenandoah Valley was over. Now again, after hearing this, I want you to remember Mulligan's Maltese Cross. Chivalry, kindness to both friend and foe. This was Colonel Mulligan. There's a lot lot of stories in the Civil War. Every battle's got its heroes. There's great stories to tell all around, but since I'm on the board of Kernstown, this is the story I like to concentrate on, because he was truly a great man, and he didn't get a lot of credit for what he did. This was his high time in the battle of his life, was at the Battle of Kernstown. So, with that being said, I know it's 25 after 12, you're 25 minutes late for lunch.
Any questions?
Yes, sir.
Next question.
That's okay. I probably wouldn't be able to answer it anyway, so.
Get old
Mike.
At 35, had he accomplished a lot in Chicago, or was this mostly his family that was probably in Chicago?
No, he was a very well-known lawyer. He was head of the Democratic Party in Chicago. He was close friends with Stephen Douglas. He helped run Douglas's 1860 presidential campaign. So he was well-known and well-liked in Chicago. The thing about Mulligan is that he was loved by the people of Chicago. He was loved by his men. I wasn't loved by the Confederates, but he certainly respected.
That's my question, my assuming it is, he had only been a practicing lawyer 4 or 5 years. I mean, did he get his money through politics or through practice of law?
I'm not sure. As far as I what's that? Right. Okay. Like I said, he just got into the bar in 56. Throughout his college years in the early 1850s, he was helping to lead the Shields guns. Okay. I don't know what
Did he get special permission to have his wife come with him?
No. She was always there, she was always a respectful distance away, and when he was here, she would cover.
That's all the time we have for questions, but I don't want Steve to leave just yet. I don't know how many of you folks know, when we say it every conference, how much we rely on our volunteers. Now, if you're a volunteer at the Battle of this Foundation, can you stand up? Stand up, any of our volunteers? How much of these folks are? We have less than 10 full-time staff at any given moment. The area at the Battle of this Foundation is supposed to be looking out for on behalf of Congress is 3 times the size of Rhode Island. We have museums, visitor centers, visitor contact stations, ranger programs, events like this one. There is no possible way all that's happening without these volunteers. Every year, we recognize one of our volunteers. Steve has done so much for us. Has not only done so much for us, but other battlefield organizations, namely Kernstown Battlefield Association, really showing volunteer leadership. And he is this year's recipient of the 2025 Volunteer of the Year Award. Now, we have a situation with the door over there, so do not use it. You can go out that set of doors in this back corner. You need to be back in your seats for us to start.